The sun streamed through the curtains of the Chen family home as Rose prepared breakfast. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, while her husband Thomas flipped through the morning newspaper. Their daughter Lily had always been the center of their world. From her first steps to her college graduation, they had been there for every milestone, every triumph, and every heartbreak. Lily was their only child, a bright young woman who had recently turned 27. She had graduated at the top of her class and landed a great job at a marketing firm downtown. Her parents couldn't have been prouder. "Do you think she'll call today?" Thomas asked, looking up from his newspaper. It had been 3 weeks since they'd heard from Lily, which was unusual. She typically called at least once a week to check in. "I'm sure she will," Rose replied, though worry lines creased her forehead. "She's probably just busy with work." What they didn't know was that their daughter's life had taken an unexpected turn. 6 months earlier, Lily had met someone at a friend's birthday party. His name was Jack Wilson, and he had swept her off her feet with his charm and attentiveness. Jack was handsome, with dark hair and a warm smile that made Lily feel like she was the only person in the room. He worked as a financial advisor and often spoke about his clients and the satisfaction he got from helping people secure their futures. He drove a nice car, dressed in tailored suits, and always knew the best restaurants in town. When Lily finally introduced Jack to her parents, Thomas had been cautiously optimistic. The man seemed polite enough, but something about him felt rehearsed, as if he was playing a role. Rose, however, was immediately charmed by his stories and the way he looked at their daughter. "He seems like a good match for you," Rose had said after that first dinner. "But aren't you moving a bit fast?" Lily had brushed off her mother's concern. "When you know," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. 3 months later, Jack proposed on a weekend trip to the mountains. He presented Lily with a stunning diamond ring and promises of a wonderful life together. Lily called her parents that same night, her voice bubbling with excitement as she shared the news. "We're getting married in 3 months, she announced. Thomas nearly choked on his tea. 3 months, that's hardly enough time to plan a wedding." "Jack says there's no reason to wait," Lily explained, "and he's already found us the perfect house." Rose and Thomas exchanged worried glances. This wasn't like their careful, thoughtful daughter. She had always been the type to plan everything meticulously, to weigh all options before making big decisions. But love, they reasoned, could change a person. The next few months passed in a blur of wedding preparations. Lily seemed distant, often canceling plans with her parents at the last minute. When they did see her, she was always with Jack, who had a way of answering questions directed at Lily as if speaking for her. "I'm just stressed about the wedding," Lily explained when Rose pulled her aside to ask if everything was okay. "There's so much to do." The wedding day arrived on a crisp autumn morning. The ceremony was small, held in a charming garden venue with only 40 guests. Lily wore a simple white dress that made her look like she had stepped out of a fairy tale. As Thomas walked her down the aisle, he felt a strange sense of unease. His daughter's hand trembled in his, and when he looked into her eyes, he saw something that looked almost like fear. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered. Lily squeezed his hand. "Yes, Dad, I'm sure." The ceremony was short, but beautiful. Jack's vows were poetic and moving, promising to cherish and protect Lily for all their days together. Lily's vows were briefer, her voice barely audible as she pledged her love. During the reception, Thomas noticed his daughter standing alone by the cake table, staring into space. When he approached, she startled as if waking from a dream. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" he asked. "Yes, just taking it all in," she replied with a small smile. "Can you believe I'm married now?" "It happened so fast," Thomas said carefully. "But as long as you're happy, that's all that matters to your mother and me." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I love you both so much, Dad. You know that, right?" "Of course we do," Thomas replied, pulling her into a hug. "And we'll always be here for you no matter what." As the evening wore on, Lily seemed to grow more anxious. She kept checking her phone and whispering with Jack in corners. When it was time for the newlyweds to leave for their honeymoon, Lily hugged her parents with unusual intensity. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad," she whispered, holding them tight. "I love you both so much." "It's not goodbye, silly," Rose laughed, wiping away a tear. "You'll be back in 2 weeks." Lily nodded, but there was something in her eyes that made Thomas's heart sink. As they watched the car drive away, Rose slipped her hand into his. "She'll be fine," she said, as much to convince herself as him. "Jack will take good care of her." Thomas nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He didn't know then that this would be the last time they would see their daughter for nearly 2 years. He didn't know that the next morning, when he tried to call her to make sure they had arrived safely at their honeymoon destination, her phone would go straight to voicemail. He didn't know that in the coming days, they would discover that Jack Wilson was not the man he claimed to be, that their daughter had vanished without a trace, and that their lives were about to be turned upside down in ways they could never have imagined. All he knew, as he watched the taillights of the car disappear into the night, was that he had never seen his daughter look so afraid. The first few days after the wedding, Rose called Lily's phone several times a day. Each time, the call went straight to voicemail. "She's probably just enjoying her honeymoon," she told Thomas, trying to hide her growing concern. "You know how young people are these days. They want to disconnect from everything." Thomas nodded, but the worry lines on his forehead deepened. "I suppose you're right," he said, though he didn't believe it. In all her travels, Lily had never gone more than a day without checking in. A week passed, then 2. The newlyweds should have returned from their honeymoon in the Maldives, but there was no word from them. No calls, no texts, no social media updates. When Thomas called the hotel where they were supposed to stay, his heart sank. "Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson checked out 10 days ago, right on schedule," the receptionist confirmed. "Is there a problem?" Thomas hung up the phone, his hands trembling. "They left the hotel," he told Rose, 10 days ago. "They should be home by now." The next morning, they drove to the house Jack and Lily had bought together, a beautiful 2-story home in a quiet suburb. The mailbox was overflowing. The newspapers had piled up on the front porch. When no one answered the doorbell, they peered through the windows. The house looked perfectly normal, yet something felt off. "We need to call the police," Thomas said firmly. Officer Chen, no relation, took their report but didn't seem overly concerned. "Newlyweds sometimes decide to extend their honeymoon," he explained. "Or they might have made a spontaneous decision to travel somewhere else. Have you checked with her friends?" Rose spent the rest of the day calling everyone in Lily's contact list. No one had heard from her. Her best friend May sounded alarmed. "This isn't like her at all," she said. "Lily always stays in touch." 3 days later, with still no word from the couple, the police finally agreed to do a welfare check. Thomas and Rose stood on the sidewalk, watching anxiously as Officer Chen and his partner entered the house, using the spare key from the real estate agent. "The house is secure," Officer Chen reported when he came back out. "Nothing seems disturbed or out of place. In fact, it's almost too perfect, like a model home. There are hardly any personal belongings." With growing concern, the police began a more thorough investigation. They discovered that Jack's office had been completely cleared out. His desk was empty, his computer gone. The filing cabinets contained nothing but outdated office supplies. "When was the last time you saw your daughter?" Detective Rivera asked Thomas and Rose as they sat in their living room the following day. "At the wedding," Thomas replied, his voice cracking. "She hugged us goodbye when they left for their honeymoon." "And this Jack Wilson, what do you know about him?" Rose frowned. "Not much, really. They only dated for 6 months before getting engaged. He said he was a financial advisor with his own firm. Did he mention any family, friends, previous relationships?" Thomas and Rose exchanged glances. "He said his parents died in a car accident when he was in college," Rose remembered, "and that he was an only child, like Lily. He didn't talk much about his past." Detective Rivera nodded, making notes. "We're checking into his background now. The firm he claimed to own, Wilson Financial Advisors, it exists on paper, but the office address is just a virtual mailbox service. The website looks professional but was only created 8 months ago. Thomas felt his stomach twist. What are you saying? We're not sure yet, the detective said carefully, but we're concerned that Mr. Wilson may not be who he claimed to be. In the days that followed, the investigation revealed troubling details. Jack Wilson's credentials were falsified. His impressive resume was fiction. His client list, when the police managed to track down some names, revealed a pattern of people who had invested money with him, only to discover later that their investments had vanished. He was running a Ponzi scheme, Detective Rivera explained, using new investors' money to pay returns to earlier investors while pocketing most of it. Several people had recently filed complaints when their calls stopped being returned and they couldn't access their accounts. Rose put her hand over her mouth. But what about Lily? Why would she disappear? She must have figured out what he was doing. The detective's expression turned grave. We found something else. In the master bedroom, hidden under the carpet there, were strands of hair that match your daughter's color, and trace amounts of blood. The room seemed to spin around Thomas. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. Are you saying he hurt her? We don't know for certain, Detective Rivera said gently, but we've upgraded this from a missing persons case to a potential kidnapping. We're working with the FBI now, and we've put out alerts to all international airports and border crossings. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He kept picturing Lily's face at the wedding, the fear in her eyes that he had noticed but failed to act on. Had she known something was wrong? Had she been trying to send him a message? While Rose finally dozed, off from exhaustion, Thomas went to Lily's old bedroom. It was largely unchanged from when she had lived at home, the bookshelves still filled with her favorite novels, the bulletin board covered with photos of friends and family. He sat on the edge of her bed, trying to think like his daughter. Lily had always been smart, observant, careful, analytical. If she had begun to suspect Jack wasn't who he claimed to be, what would she have done? She wouldn't have confronted him directly, not if she felt unsafe. She would have gathered evidence. She would have made a plan. She wouldn't have just disappeared, Thomas whispered to himself. Not without leaving us some kind of clue. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, Thomas made a decision. The police were doing their job, but no one knew Lily like her parents did. No one would search for her with the same determination. No one would notice the subtle details that might lead to her whereabouts. He would find his daughter, even if he had to track her across the world, even if it took the rest of his life. What Thomas didn't know was that the mystery was far deeper than he imagined, and that finding Lily would uncover secrets that would shake their family to its core. Thomas sat at the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of papers, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Before retirement, he had been an accountant for 30 years, with a keen eye for numbers and a talent for spotting patterns. Now he was putting those skills to use for the most important case of his life, finding his daughter. While the FBI focused their search on international trafficking rings and border crossings, Thomas took a different approach. If Jack, or whatever his real name was, had been running financial scams, there would be a paper trail. Money always left footprints. You've barely slept in days, Rose said, placing a cup of coffee beside him. The dark circles under her eyes showed she wasn't faring much better. Maybe you should rest. Thomas shook his head. I can't rest until we find her, he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. I know she's out there, Rose, I can feel it. Rose sat down across from him. The detective called this morning while you were in the shower. They've identified Jack's real identity. His name is Alan Parker. He's wanted in 3 states for fraud and identity theft. Thomas looked up sharply. Did they find any connection to Lily? Not yet, Rose admitted, but they're still looking. While the police pursued their leads, Thomas continued his own investigation. He had managed to get copies of Jack's bank statements through a friend who worked at the bank. Not strictly legal, but Thomas was beyond caring about such technicalities. The statements revealed large sums of money moving in and out of various accounts, all eventually funneling into offshore accounts that were harder to trace. Rose, meanwhile, spent her days calling every friend, acquaintance, and colleague of Lily's, piecing together what they knew about Jack. Most knew very little. He had kept himself somewhat separate from Lily's social circle, but a few details emerged that caught her attention. May said something interesting, Rose told Thomas. One evening, she said that about a month before the wedding, Lily asked her some strange questions about Jack, whether she thought he seemed genuine, whether his stories ever seemed inconsistent. Thomas looked up from his laptop. So she was having doubts? Maybe, Rose said. But then why would she go through with the wedding? That question haunted them both. Lily had always been level-headed and cautious. If she had suspected something was wrong, why hadn't she backed out? Why hadn't she come to them for help? 6 months into their search, with the official investigation growing cold, Thomas and Rose received an unexpected call. It was from the manager of a bank downtown. Mr. Chen, we've been trying to reach you. Your daughter rented a safety deposit box here shortly before her wedding. The annual fee is due and we can't reach her. Thomas and Rose looked at each other, hope flaring for the first time in months. We'll be right there, Thomas said, already reaching for his car keys. At the Yai Bank, they provided identification and proof of relationship to Lily. Given the circumstances and the police report on file, the manager agreed to let them access the box. The small metal container held just 2 items, a flash drive and a handwritten note. With shaking hands, Thomas unfolded the note. He recognized Lily's handwriting immediately. If anything happens to me, the password is Butterfly 1990, he read aloud, his voice catching. It was Lily's childhood nickname and the year she was born. That night, Thomas plugged the flash drive into his computer and entered the password. A folder opened, revealing dozens of files meticulously organized and labeled. Reports, screenshots, photos, recordings, all evidence of Jack's or Alan's true identity and criminal activities. She knew, Rose whispered, looking over his shoulder. She knew he wasn't who he claimed to be. As they dug deeper into the files, a clearer picture emerged. Lily had begun to suspect Jack 3 months into their relationship, when small inconsistencies in his stories caught her attention. Instead of confronting him, she had started quietly investigating, using her lunch breaks and late nights to gather evidence. But why would she marry him if she knew he was a criminal? Thomas asked, bewildered. The answer came in a password-protected, document labeled plan. Lily had discovered that Jack wasn't working alone. He was part of a larger operation involving identity theft, fraud, and money laundering across multiple states. The wedding had been her way of getting closer to the evidence she needed. She was building a case, Thomas realized, a mix of pride and horror washing over him. She was trying to gather enough evidence to take down the entire operation, but something had gone wrong. The last entry in Lily's journal was dated 2 days before the wedding. I think he suspects something, she had written. He asked about my laptop today and seemed too interested in my banking passwords. I need to be careful. Thomas and Rose took their discovery to Detective Rivera the next morning. The flash drive provided the break in the case they had been waiting for. The FBI was brought in again, and this time they had solid leads to follow. Using the information Lily had gathered, combined with Thomas's financial analysis, they were able to track movements of money across borders. One particular transaction caught Thomas's eye, a large sum transferred to a bank in Argentina shortly after Lily and Jack had disappeared. Could they have gone to Argentina? Rose asked Detective Rivera. It's possible, the detective admitted. We'll coordinate with authorities there. But Thomas wasn't willing to wait for official channels. With the help of a tech-savvy nephew, he began searching social media and public records in Argentina. Hours turned into days as he methodically combed through information, looking for any sign of Jack or Lily. His breakthrough came from an unexpected source. An English-language newspaper in Buenos Aires had published a photo of a charity event. In the background, barely visible, was a man who looked remarkably like Jack, though with darker hair and a beard. It's him, Thomas said, enlarging the image. I'd know that face anywhere. Rose peered at the screen. But where's Lily? Is she with him? The article identified the man as Richard Bell, a foreign investor who had recently made generous donations to several local charities. The event had taken place at a hotel in a small northern town, far from the capital. Thomas printed the article and added it to the growing file of evidence. A new determination filled him. After 6 months of dead ends and heartbreak, they finally had a solid lead. Lily was out there somewhere, and they were one step closer to finding her. What they couldn't know was that the truth would be far more complex and dangerous than they had imagined, and that finding Lily would put their own lives at risk. Thomas and Rose sat in Detective Rivera's office, watching her face as she reviewed the evidence they had gathered. The detective's expression remained neutral, but her eyes widened slightly as she examined the newspaper photograph from Argentina. "I understand your eagerness," she said finally, setting down the file. "But you can't just fly to Argentina and start looking for your daughter. This man, Jack Allen, or whatever his real name is, appears to be involved in serious criminal activities. It could be dangerous." "We've waited 6 months," Thomas said firmly. "We can't wait any longer. If the FBI wants to coordinate with Argentine authorities, that's fine. But we're going." Detective Rivera sighed. "Let me make some calls. At the very least, we can connect you with local law enforcement there. Promise me you won't do anything reckless." Rose reached for her husband's hand. "We promise," she said, though the determination in her eyes suggested otherwise. 2 days later, they were on a flight to Buenos Aires. Thomas had cashed in his retirement fund, sold their second car, and borrowed from friends to finance the trip. "We'll stay as long as it takes," he told Rose as the plane took off. Their first days in Argentina were frustrating. Despite the connections Detective Rivera had arranged, local police were reluctant to prioritize their case. "Many people come to Argentina to start new lives," one officer explained with a shrug. "It is not a crime to change your name or move to a new country." "But he stole money," Thomas insisted. "And we have reason to believe our daughter is being held against her will." The officer nodded sympathetically but made no promises. "We will keep an eye out for them." Unwilling to rely solely on official channels, Thomas and Rose began their own investigation. They showed Jack's picture at hotels, restaurants, and shops in the northern town where he had been spotted. Most people shook their heads, but a waiter at an upscale restaurant recognized him. "Yes, he comes here sometimes," the waiter confirmed in halting English. "With business partners. Always paying with cash, big tips." "Have you seen a young woman with him?" Rose asked eagerly, showing a picture of Lily. "Our daughter." The waiter studied the photo and shook his head. "No, always with men. Business meetings, I think." It wasn't much, but it confirmed that Jack, now calling himself Richard Bell, was indeed in Argentina. They continued their search, covering the small town systematically, street by street. Their breakthrough came at a pharmacy on the outskirts of town. "Yes, I know this man," the pharmacist said when shown Jack's photo. "He lives in the big house on the hill, the one with the iron gates." Rose gripped Thomas's arm tightly. "And have you seen this woman?" she asked, showing Lily's picture. The pharmacist hesitated. "Maybe. There are several young women who live there. Sometimes the housekeeper comes to get medications for them." Thomas felt his heart pounding. "Several women? What kind of medications?" "Nothing unusual," the pharmacist assured him. "Vitamins, headache pills, things for upset stomach, normal things." That evening, Thomas and Rose drove slowly past the house the pharmacist had described. It was an imposing property set back from the road, surrounded by high walls topped with security cameras. The iron gates were closed with a guard booth visible just inside. "What now?" Rose whispered. "We can't just walk up and knock on the door." Thomas took pictures with his phone, capturing as much detail as possible about the property's layout. "We need to tell Detective Rivera what we've found. If Lily is in there, we need help to get her out safely." Back at their hotel, they sent the information to Detective Rivera, who promised to coordinate with the FBI and Argentine authorities. "Don't do anything on your own," she warned. "This needs to be handled through proper channels." They agreed, but as days passed with no visible action, their patience wore thin. Thomas began staking out the house, parking at different spots with a view of the gates, noting when people came and went. He observed several men in expensive suits, the occasional delivery truck, and a middle-aged woman who appeared to be the housekeeper. But there was no sign of Lily or any young women at all. They must be kept inside, he told Rose. Maybe they're not allowed to leave. Their waiting game was interrupted by an unexpected development. As Thomas watched the house one afternoon, a sleek black car with tinted windows pulled up to the gates. When they opened, he caught a glimpse of the passenger, Jack. Acting on instinct, Thomas followed the car at a discreet distance. It traveled into the center of town, stopping outside a bank. While Jack went inside, Thomas parked nearby and waited, his heart racing. When Jack emerged 30 minutes later, he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, her face partly obscured by large sunglasses and a scarf. Even at a distance, Thomas recognized his daughter's walk, the way she held her shoulders. "Lily," he whispered, reaching for his phone to take pictures. The pair got back into the car, which then drove to a small cafe. Through the window, Thomas could see them sitting at a table talking. Jack seemed relaxed, smiling occasionally. Lily's expression was harder to read, but she didn't appear to be distressed. There were no visible signs that she was being forced or threatened. Thomas was torn between rushing into the cafe and maintaining his cover. Before he could decide, his phone rang. It was Rose. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice tense. "The FBI agent just called. They're coordinating with local police for a raid on the house tomorrow morning. I'm following Jack," Thomas said quietly. "Rose? Lily is with him. I can see her right now. They're in a cafe in town." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Is she okay? Does she look hurt?" "She seems fine," Thomas replied, still watching through the window. "They're just talking, like any normal couple." "This doesn't make sense," Rose said. "If she's free to move around, why hasn't she contacted us? Why did she disappear?" Thomas had no answer. As he watched, Jack and Lily stood up to leave. On impulse, he raised his camera and took several clear shots of them together. As if sensing his gaze, Lily turned in his direction. For a brief moment, their eyes met through the cafe window. Thomas held his breath, waiting for a reaction. Recognition, surprise, a cry for help. Instead, Lily quickly looked away, placing her hand on Jack's arm as they walked out. Had she seen him? Did she recognize her own father? And if she did, why had she turned away? Thomas followed them back to the car, staying just close enough to keep them in sight. Something wasn't right. The Lily he knew would never have willingly cut off all contact with her family. She would never have let them suffer months of agonizing uncertainty, unless she had no choice. Unless she was involved in something so complex and dangerous that she couldn't reach out, even when she saw a chance. As the black car pulled away, Thomas made a decision. The official raid might be planned for tomorrow, but he couldn't wait. Somehow, tonight he would find a way to speak to his daughter alone. What he didn't realize was that the situation was far more complicated than he could have imagined, and that the truth would challenge everything he thought he knew about his daughter. The night air was cool as Thomas parked his rental car on a side street near the gated house. He had told Rose to stay at the hotel, a decision she had strongly opposed until he promised to call her every 30 minutes. "If I miss even one, contact Detective Rivera immediately," he had instructed her. Thomas had no real plan. The high walls and security cameras made it impossible to simply sneak onto the property. His best hope was to watch for Lily leaving or entering to somehow create a moment to speak with her alone. As darkness fell, lights came on inside the house. Through gaps in the curtains, he could see figures moving about. His phone buzzed, a text from Rose. "FBI confirmed raid for 6 a.m. Please come back to hotel." Thomas was about to respond when he noticed a side gate opening. A woman emerged, wrapped in a light jacket, her head covered with a scarf. Even in the dim street lighting, he recognized his daughter. She looked around quickly, then began walking briskly down the street, alone. Without hesitation, Thomas got out of his car and followed at a distance. Lily walked for several blocks, eventually entering a small park. She sat on a bench facing a fountain, pulled out her phone, and appeared to be typing something. Thomas approached slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. "Lily?" he said softly when he was just a few feet away. She jumped up, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. For a moment she looked poised to run, then recognition dawned in her eyes. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice a mix of shock and something else. Was it fear? "What are you doing here? How did you find me?" "We've been looking for you for 6 months," Thomas said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Your mother and we've been out of our minds with worry." Lily glanced nervously around the park. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." "Not safe?" "Lily, what's going on? Are you in trouble? Is he forcing you to stay with him?" She shook her head quickly. "It's not what you think. I can't explain everything now, but you need to leave Argentina. Today. Go home and forget you saw me." Thomas took a step closer. "I'm not leaving without you. The FBI is coordinating with local police. There's going to be a raid on that house tomorrow morning. Whatever trouble you're in, we can help you." Lily's face paled. "A raid?" "No, Dad, you don't understand. You have to stop it. People could get hurt." "People are already getting hurt," Thomas insisted. "Jack or Alan or Richard, whatever his real name is. He's been stealing money from innocent people. And those other women in the house, they're not prisoners," Lily interrupted. "They're agents, like me." Thomas stared at his daughter, trying to process her words. "Agents? What are you talking about?" Lily looked at her watch and seemed to make a decision. "I have 10 minutes before I'll be missed. I'll tell you what I can, but you have to promise to go back to your hotel and call off that raid." Still stunned, Thomas nodded. They sat side by side on the bench, and Lily began to speak quickly. 3 years ago, during my semester abroad in college, I was approached by an international intelligence agency. They were recruiting students with specific language skills and analytical abilities. I went through training during what you thought were my summer internships. Thomas tried to absorb what she was saying. "You're a spy? That's impossible." "Not a spy exactly," Lily said. "An operative. Jack is a real criminal. Everything you discovered about him is true. My assignment was to get close to him, to gather evidence about his organization. It's much bigger than just him, Dad. It's an international network of identity theft and money laundering that funds other criminal enterprises." "But you married him," Thomas said, still struggling to understand. Lily's expression hardened. "It was part of the operation. My handlers didn't expect it to go that far. But when he proposed, we saw an opportunity to get deeper into the organization." "The honeymoon was when we faked my kidnapping," Lily confirmed. "We needed a reason for my sudden disappearance. Jack's superiors were getting suspicious. We had to make it look like he had taken me against my will. Maybe even—" She stopped, unable to finish the thought. "Do you know what you put us through?" Thomas asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "Your mother cries herself to sleep every night. We sold our car, emptied our savings, all to find you." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I wanted to tell you, but it would have put you in danger. It still does. That's why you need to leave. If this is true, why would your agency let us suffer? Why wouldn't they at least tell us you were safe?" "Because officially, this operation doesn't exist," Lily explained. "It's completely off the books, and my cover is too valuable. We're finally getting close to the people at the top." Thomas reached for his daughter's hand. "Come home with me, Lily. Whatever you're involved in, it's not worth the risk." She squeezed his hand but shook her head. "I can't walk away now. We're too close. But I promise you, when this is over, I'll come home." She looked at her watch again and stood up. "I have to go back now. Please, Dad, call off the raid. Tell them you were mistaken." "I don't know if I can do that," Thomas said honestly. Then at least warn them that there are friendly operatives inside. Tell them to contact. She wrote a name and a series of numbers on a slip of paper. This person can verify everything. I've told you. As she turned to leave, Thomas stood up quickly. Wait, your mother. Let me call her. Let her hear your voice. Lily hesitated, then nodded. Thomas pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed Rose. Thomas, are you okay? Rose's worried voice came through clearly. I'm with Lily, he said, putting the phone on speaker. She's here, Rose. She's safe. Lily? Rose cried. Lily, is that really you? It's me, Mom, Lily said, her voice breaking. I'm okay. I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. Where are you? Are you coming back to the hotel with Dad? Lily looked at Thomas, her eyes pleading. I can't explain everything now, but I'm safe, I promise. Dad will tell you more. I love you both so much. Before Rose could respond, Lily kissed her father's cheek and hurried away. Thomas watched her disappear back toward the gated house, his mind reeling from everything he had learned. Back at the hotel, he showed Rose the slip of paper and explained Lily's incredible story. Rose's expression shifted from disbelief to anger to cautious hope. Do you believe her? She asked finally. Thomas sighed. I don't know what to believe anymore, but she didn't seem scared of Jack, and she was free to walk around alone. They decided to call the number Lily had given them. The conversation that followed confirmed everything their daughter had told them. The operation was real and Lily was indeed working as an undercover operative. Your daughter has shown exceptional courage and skill, the voice on the other end of the line assured them. The information she's gathered has already led to several arrests in other countries. When the operation concludes, which should be within a few weeks, she'll be free to come home. The next morning, they watched from their hotel window as police cars gathered near the gated house. The raid went forward, but with a crucial difference. The authorities now knew which people to arrest and which were undercover agents. By evening, the news reported the breakup of a major international crime ring, with multiple arrests but no injuries. Jack's face was among those shown being led away in handcuffs. 3 weeks later, Thomas and Rose stood anxiously in the arrival area of the airport. When Lily walked through the gates, she looked both the same and somehow different, more confident, more mature, her eyes holding secrets they might never fully understand. As they embraced, tears flowing freely, Thomas realized that the daughter who had returned was not quite the same woman who had disappeared. She had lived a whole other life they knew nothing about. But she was home now, safe in their arms, and that was what mattered most. The months that followed weren't easy. Trust had to be rebuilt. Questions remained, some of which Lily couldn't answer due to confidentiality agreements, but slowly, their family began to heal. Will you ever do something like that again? Rose asked one evening as they sat together, on the porch. Lily looked out at the sunset, considering her answer. I don't know, she said finally. I believe in the work I did. It mattered. But I also know now what it cost, not just for me, but for the people I love. Thomas took his daughter's hand. Whatever you decide, no more disappearing acts. We're a family. We face things together. Lily smiled, squeezing his hand in silent agreement. Some promises they all knew were meant to be kept.